Hi, welcome to Chapter 9 from the textbook titled Understanding the Report Process and Research Methods. We're going to cover two basic sections of this chapter, which starts with the concept of characteristics that commonly tie reports together, and then we're going to talk about the problem-solving process itself and how we actually get into writing the report. First of all, the characteristics of reports. There are four basic characteristics that tie a report together. First of all, that most reports tend to flow upward in the organization. This is because they are usually requested by someone in supervisory position. Secondly, reports are logically organized, and when you thumb through a report, any kind of report, you'll see that there is great thought given to its structure. Third, reports are usually objective. There is a common sense of objectivity to them and fairness and correctness about them. And fourth, reports are usually for a limited audience, usually within the organization itself. Reports are simply defined as an orderly, objective message used to convey information from one organizational area to another or from one organization to another to assist in decision-making or problem-solving. Now, there are a number of different types of reports, and there can be any combination of these different types that fit together. First, there is the formal or the informal report, and a report could be objective and carefully structured and argued to make it a formal report, or it could be a personal or a colloquial report, such as a regular one-page memo, formal or informal. There's also a short report or a long report. Obviously, a short report could be as short as 1 page or a little bit less than that, and a long report could be as many as 20 pages or more. Thirdly, you have informational or analytical reports. An informational report has objective information, factual information about it, and for example, it might be something like so many widgets have been sold within the last month. So that's just a fact that might be included in a report. Or a problem-solving report, something that would lead to trying to find a solution to a problem and making a recommendation for that problem. So either informational or analytical problem-solving. Another kind of report would be an internal or an external report. The internal report is that which would be within the organization itself, from one party within the organization to another party, and the external report would be from someone within the organization writing to an organization outside that particular organization. Another, it would be periodic. If this is something that is occurring on a regular basis, for example, it could be a monthly report, it could be a semi-annual report or an annual report. And then finally, you have a functional report, something that would be very specific to, for example, an accounting issue or a financial issue. Now, you can have any combination of a report. You could have a formal report that is also a short report, that is also an internal report, and maybe is also a periodic report. But as you tie these together, you begin to define certain characteristics that make up that report. We also want to take a look briefly at proposals. Proposals are a recommendation for meeting a need, such as in a bid. And so we write up a bid to say we have this particular need in the organization and this is what it's going to cost to get it taken care of. So we write up a proposal, a matter of suggestion, trying to persuade someone to do something that it benefits us in the long run or brings a sales commission to us. Secondly, we have not only the characteristics of reports, which is one of the major subheading or major headings of the chapter, but we also have the basis for the reports or the problem-solving process, which ties up the rest of the chapter and brings to us the concept of the process and the procedure of putting together a good report. Let's start first of all with defining the problem, recognizing and defining the problem. There are three different ways we can do this in a research report. There's the problem statement, or there's the statement of purpose, or there is the hypothesis. Let's take a look at each of these three just briefly. The problem statement is stating very clearly a problem which needs to be solved. And the report is an effort to try to resolve that question and to solve the problem. A second way to define a problem in a report is to write a statement of purpose, which is basically to say this is the goal of the study. This study will help us to try and achieve these particular goals. So we may not be solving a problem, but we do want to achieve some kind of goal or achieve some kind of standard at the end of the report. The third is a hypothesis, and this is primarily for empirical research, but I mention it simply so that we can keep an awareness of what reports are like. So we have the problem-solving report, we have the goal setting or the statement of purpose, and we have a hypothesis, which may be a statement that we have to prove in the report or disprove perhaps through our research. It, again, as I say, is more of an empirical type of research and probably not one which we will be doing frequently throughout a business communication course, but something to be aware of nonetheless. When it comes to recognizing and defining problems, there are several different factors we need to keep in mind. First of all, we may want to limit the scope of the problem. Basically, this is to establish boundaries for the report. We want to talk about what will be covered or what will not be covered. For example, if we do an informational report on Microsoft, we might want to talk about the history of the organization and the management structure of the organization, but then we may want to limit the report so that we do not talk about the finances of the organization. So basically we state the limitations of the report at the very beginning of our research process, and we say, this is what we're going to talk about, this is what we're not going to talk about, and that is limiting the scope of the problem. We also want to talk about defining the terms as clearly as we possibly can, so that we're certain that the readers are on the same page with the writers and that we are talking about the same kinds of issues. We want to talk about documenting procedures or the process or the methodology of this research process. Problem solving, for example, a statement of the problem and the options, the analysis and the solution, may be one way to approach the methodology of the research paper. Another way may be to talk about something like a longitudinal study, which takes place over time. But either way, we want to talk about the methodology or the process of writing the paper. So by talking about the problem-solving process, we want to limit the scope of the problem. We want to clearly define our terms. We want to document the processes and the procedures and the methodology of the paper. Then we move on to selecting a method of solution. And there are two different sources of information that we use in a research process, and that is secondary sources and primary sources. Secondary research is reporting information that has already been created by other people. We find this usually people who have researched a given topic and then write about it, and they are talking to us about the situation, the issue, the company, the leader of the organization, and they give to us their interpretation of the basic facts. These are called secondary resources. We find these in printed sources, either books or serial publication periodicals. And a serial periodical can be a newspaper or it could be a journal or something that comes out on a regular basis. Another way we find secondary research is by taking a look at electronic sources. Now, most students start with Google and Wikipedia and tend to end with Google or with Wikipedia, and that's a very poor way of doing research. Please start there and get a context of what you're looking, but don't live there. Move on, and most of your reporting will not include Google sources or Wikipedia sources. Go for credible sources, like databases that you can find in the Wall Street Journal or other very credible sources, or go to the NNU library, and there you will find what is commonly referred to as the hidden internet, because you must have a password to get into the NNU library. But once you get into the library or other university libraries, you will be able to find on the hidden internet more information than you can imagine, and far better information than you could ever find on a regular Google search on the internet. It's important, too, to learn how to do a good internet search. You must learn to choose appropriate search engines and know which search engines will work best for you. Like I said, most students start with Google, but there are other search engines that are more appropriate. Many times you will find these on the hidden internet, and they will be most useful. For example, Business Source Premier is an excellent source of information, but you must be on the NNU Library website to find that. You'll also want to learn how to use Boolean operands, such as and, or not, and also using quotation marks to help you find what you need. We've talked about secondary research, but let's talk about primary research for a moment. Secondary research is reporting on information that has already been created by others, but primary research is reporting from first-hand and original documents. So if you're reading a book about George Washington, you're probably using a secondary resource because this information has been put together by someone about George Washington. If you want to use primary sources, for example, then you would start reading the actual letters that George Washington wrote and drawing your own conclusions about what he was trying to communicate or trying to say. So primary research is reporting from first-hand and from original documents. This form of research can take many different ways. You can use observation, which is to find a place and sit down and just observe what is happening and writing up a description, and we call this many times descriptive research, where you are describing what you see and what you observe. Many times to watch the way management is working or to watch the way people on the floor of a factory are working, we just observe and then we write it down, and that becomes a very central core of our research. Secondly, another kind of primary research is normative research. This is where we determine the status of something at a given period of time, at a given moment in time. So for example, a survey is normative research. We survey a group of people over a day or two, and then we have a snapshot of what those people are thinking or how they're behaving. An interview is the same kind of thing. It's the way a person is thinking on the particular day that you interview him or her. There's a third kind of normative research, and that is experimental, where we study individual variables and then compare those with a sample group. So we look for the way variables influence an organization or a group of people on a particular moment. And then we also have to consider, along with primary research, we have to consider any sample sizes. Usually it's very difficult for us to sample or survey or research a whole organization, 100% of each person within that organization, especially if the organization has thousands of people in it. And so what we do is select a sample of people within that organization, and then we test them, we survey them, we interview them, and try and find out from them what could be representative of the whole group of people. Now, it's important when you use a sample that you avoid common bias, like, for example, sampling or interviewing only women as they leave Costco, and assuming that our results are going to tell us what individual buying habits are in Costco. Now, if you only researched and asked women these questions, you'll have a good understanding of what women are doing in Costco and what they're buying, but you won't have a good understanding of what the average buyer is buying because you have men tied into there. You could also discriminate between age and other kinds of issues, military personnel, for example, or business people, but you need to be careful not to throw in your bias when you select your sample group. From this point, I invite you to continue to the second part of the Chapter 9 lecture.